who was Paul's son, true son, in common faith. And in chapter 1, verse 5, he says that he is, the reason I left you in Crete was that you might put in order what was left unfinished and appoint elders. And then he tells them in verse 10, for there are many rebellious people full of meaningless talk and deception, especially those of the circumcision group. They must be silenced because they are disrupting whole households by teaching things that they ought not to teach. And he says, and that for the sake of dishonest gain. He said, one of their own prophets have said, the Cretans are always liars, evil brutes, lazy gluttons. And Paul says to Titus, this statement is true. Therefore rebuke them sharply. So he's already told Titus, you've got to silence that group, and you've got to speak to them sharply, so that they will be sound in their faith, and they will pay no attention to the Jewish myths or to the merely human commands of those who reject the truth. And he says in verse 16, they claim to know God, but by their actions they deny him. He says they are detestable, disobedient, and unfit for doing anything good. What a reputation. Then he begins in chapter 2, and this is where our verse is taken from. You, however, must teach what is appropriate to sound doctrine. And remember, we said sound doctrine is just healthy teachings, true teachings. And then he says, teach the older men, and you'll find he was to teach the older men as well as he was to teach the elders. We didn't read that, but it's in there. And then he's to teach the younger men the very thing that we have today in our lesson. Teach the older men to be temperate, worthy of respect, and self-controlled. So that's what our lesson is about today, is disciplining ourselves. Then he moves on to verse 3. Likewise, teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live, not to be slanderous or addicted to too much wine, but to teach what is good. Then they can urge the younger women to love their husbands and their children, to be self-controlled. Isn't that neat? That is our lesson today, to be self-controlled. I've given you your outline, but I'm not necessarily going so much by this outline today, but you've got it there for you know. So if anybody says anything, did Miss Martha teach the word, our lesson, you say, yeah, she gave us the outline. So, but the Apostle Paul, who wrote these words to Titus, he himself was a self-controlled man, not at all times, just like us, but he knew how to discipline himself. And so as I studied scripture this week and kept thinking on my Sunday school lesson this week and going through the outline, I do good if I can find somebody in scripture that did that or needs to do that or gets off track and everything. So this week, God has just reminded me of many people in scripture that practiced discipline. And so the Apostle Paul was one of the main fellows that practiced discipline. He knew what was in his life that was nothing but garbage. You remember how he said, that was just garbage to me, after he got saved. Do we in our lives, can we look at our lives and know what's just absolutely nothing but garbage? We've all got some of that in our lives. And Paul was a wise fella. He knew what was garbage in his life. And so that would help us to know, can you look at your life and think, now that's of no good to anybody. It may be something that you've dusted for 100 times, and you just think, I'm tired of this. Is that any good to me? Who gave me that anyway? you know. Well, I think I'm going to pass it on to somebody else because I'm tired of dusting it. Can you look at things in your life and say, that's not good? Well, yesterday, me and some ladies went out on Natchez Trace. We went to see the hummingbirds. Honey, there wasn't any hummingbirds. So, you know, I thought of it after I got back. I thought, well, good grief. We just wasted. And then I thought, I did learn about the jewel weed that the hummingbirds like. And it's fixed just so their little beaks will go directly in there to draw out the nectar. So it's just interesting to learn about that. And then I sat down, put off my shoes, put them in this water that was flowing. And oh, it was so nice and cool. And so when I got home and I was thinking about, well, we just wasted this time. We didn't see 3 hummingbirds was all we seen. And then God spoke to my heart. Oh no, you didn't waste that time. I was there. Look at all those wildflowers you've seen blooming. I did that. That little brook of water that you cooled your feet in, that was me. I did that for you. And honey, I just had the best time turning that thing around, looking at it a different way, and then, Lord, I just enjoyed this day. Even though we turned to go to Tupelo on the Natchez Trace. We were supposed to turn to go to Nashville, Natchez Trace. We did get tangled up a little bit, but we did make it. And so I just said, Lord, what a good, fun day it was. So that's important for us to look at what happens to us, or what we do. And can we say, that's good, or that's not good? And Lord, I need to get rid of that in my life. Well, Paul was my first one that I thought about. Paul was the one that says, I do what I shouldn't do, and that what I should do, I don't do. Is that you? That is me. That is me. I'm always that way. I mean, I get home from play school and I kind of analyze my day. And I think, Martha, you shouldn't have done that, girl. You know? And so, for me, that's very important to take the time to do that. And Paul was this kind of guy. In Romans chapter 7 is where it brings out a lot about Paul. But Paul said, O wretched man, who shall deliver me? He just felt so like, where am I going? What's happening to me? I can't seem to do what I ought to do. But then he said, I thank God through Jesus Christ, he is able to help me. And that's just the neatest thing. That's the way it is. When we can recognize the garbage in our life, or things that we're doing we shouldn't, or where we're going we shouldn't, or things that we eat and we shouldn't. You know, Friday night was domino night at my house. We did have fried potatoes. We did have cornbread. Doesn't that sound good so far? We had beans and chicken, and with those beans, it was so good. We did have kraut and wieners. Oh, we just had a lot of food. But we also had a lot of desserts. Well, I cut a little piece of this and a little piece of this. We had like about 5 desserts. Judy Pratt was there. She knows I'm not just yakking. And after everybody left, I thought, Lord, I know what the scales are going to say in the morning when I get home. And I should have said no to some of that dessert. But see, that's my weakest. That's my weakest, is my desserts. So I should have said no to that. So, girls, I don't know about you, but that's where I am with this lesson today. But in our outline, it says, learn to say no. That's number 1 on our outline.